Welcome to the Jazz Notes podcast. I'm Ben Anderson.
I'm Chandler Holt.
It is October 21st. We are 1 day away from the opening of the NBA season. We are 2 days away from the opening of the regular season. Team 51 for the Utah Jazz. That was Team 51?
Yep.
Yeah, they did 50 last year, hence all the 50 greatest players and things that we did. At 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone at KSLSports.com, which is where you can find us on Twitter. You can also read us at Ben's Hoops, at C Holt Sports on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere you get your social media, whatever. So appreciate everybody tuning in and listening. The preseason is wrapped up. The Jazz finish with a 4-2 record. We'll talk about that, especially the last two games. We will preview the upcoming week. We will give our preseason, or I guess our pre-regular season predictions for Jazz, MVP, sixth-man, defensive player of the year, et cetera, et cetera. And then we'll get to your mailbag. As always, on Mondays, I send out a prompt on Twitter, X, whatever, at Ben's Hoops, asking for your questions. You can just reply to that prompt, and we'll answer them on the podcast, or you can DM me, which a lot of people have been doing lately, so appreciate that.
So let's get started with the preseason games. 2 games since the last time we recorded.
Yep.
The first game was against Sacramento, a 117-114 win. It came down to De'Aaron Fox missing a 35-footer at the very end, but the Jazz did sneak out a win there. Keontae with 24 points, probably the biggest highlight from that game. Markin also had 21. Jazz shoot 54, 40, 90 from the field, but still had 24 turnovers, which has been sort of a trend for the Jazz in the preseason. And then the next game, a huge loss, ugly game, 124-86, lost to Portland. Sensabaugh had 13 points. No other player had more than 10.
Yeah, it was awful. Jazz played awful. You got a little bit of both, and I think a lot of people are asking, like, which team are the Jazz? They are both.
Yep.
You're going to have some nights when it clicks and they play really hard together, and teams are in Salt Lake, and Keontae George goes off for whatever 24 points like he had against the Kings, and you think, okay, I get it. I see it. I see how this team could play. And, Collin was good. He had 16 points, and Lowry had 21 points and only took 10 shots. It's like, great. That team makes sense. And then there's going to be games where they were down 52-26 to Portland, and Portland was not playing all their guys. Portland was not playing DeAndre Ayton. They were playing, unfortunately, Donovan Clingan, the lottery pick, and he really badly outplayed Walker Kessler. And I know they only played the first half, but Walker Kessler played 12 minutes and 2 points and 6 rebounds. I'd have to go back and look what Clingan had at the half, but he finished with 14 points and 20 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 blocks. He badly outplayed Walker when they were on the floor together. In fact, the entire Blazers team outplayed the Jazz. So they just got absolutely smoked, which is how you end up with 25 wins.
Yep.
12 times, 13 times a year, you play really well. 10 times you just beat kind of scheduled teams and wins where they're coming into Salt Lake on the second night of a back-to-back and a player's hurt. And then you lose the rest. And that's why I've had that number 25. It's kind of like this. Every time I close my eyes, I just see 25. 25. That's what I think the Jazz are going to get to. And I'm not sure I saw anything in the preseason that made me think that's not the case.
And even with the win over the Kings, you talk about, there's going to be good nights and bad nights, mostly bad nights. Even that game against Sacramento, Sacramento's supposed to be a decent team, and it was a good win, entertaining game. It was 24 Jazz turnovers to 11.
Yeah.
If you don't have that number, then it's not a 3-point win. That's a 20-point win.
Yeah, right.
And there's a lot of things like that to point at from the preseason, which is a good transition. I'll ask you, what is the biggest takeaways from preseason for you?
Yeah, the turnovers are crazy.
Yeah.
It's very regularly over 20. A good number is 13.
Yep.
Jazz are very, very regularly over 20. And then, you beat Sacramento. Sacramento was 10 of 38 from 3 in a night where you were 14 of 35 from 3. So you were 40%. They were under 27%. You hit 4 more threes, which is only 12 points. It doesn't seem like a lot, but that's disastrous. That's really, really bad.
Yep.
So you can't survive doing those things. And that even included Lowry Markin getting the free throw line 10 times. So that's how that game was close and why the Jazz won. But they're gonna get beat up pretty badly. I'd like to look at this really quick. Let me see if I can find the rebounding total. Kings had 44 rebounds in that game. Jazz had 41, so that wasn't as lopsided as I thought. Portland game, I wonder if it was a little bit more lopsided because of how good Clingan was. Their total rebounds were 44 again. Or no, the Jazz's were 44, and the Trailblazers were 56. Yeah. So that's a big number. I mean, we're talking possessions. Turnovers and rebounds are possession numbers. Are you getting offensive rebounds, or the Jazz not getting offensive rebounds? And then are you giving the ball away? Jazz give the ball away a lot. And when you can't run stuff, you can't score.
Yeah.
The Jazz don't have good enough isolation scores to make up for that. And they want to make sure their guards are actually playing guard, not just dribbling down and shooting. So that's my takeaway.
And the other thing I would say is for the rebounding, like for the turnover problem, it's just the guards need to be better. You need to make better decisions.
Yeah.
But who do you turn to for more rebounds other than hoping that Walker Kessler can be a double-double guy?
Yeah, it's been a funny conversation because like Bryce Sensabaugh is talking about rebounding more. It's like, okay, well, you're to be the 8th best rebounder on the team.
Yeah.
You go from 2 a game as a rookie to maybe 4. Like 4 would be a big jump. That's doubling his rebounds. It's hard to guard or hard to get rebounds as a guard. So, yeah, I don't know. Lowry's not going to get over 10, I don't think. John Collins maybe is pretty good off the bench if he's now rebounding against backup centers as opposed to starting centers. But, yeah, Walker's got to be at like 13 a game.
Yeah.
Otherwise, Jazz are going to be a bad rebounding team, and then mixed with the turnovers, it's going to be trouble. Also recognize this. Nobody scouts each other in the preseason.
True.
So nobody is saying like, well, Cody Williams doesn't know how to do this at all, so let's just go after that every single time and just run him off the floor because he can't defend this action, or because when he gets into this action offensively, you don't have to guard him because I know the ball is not going to him because he can't make the shot, so they're just going to back off. Like what happens when the opposing center is guarding Isaiah Collier? Okay, everything you plan to do is out the window now because the starting center is for the opposing team is at the paint, so you can't get to the rim anymore. So your entire offense is gone. It's like having an extra defender out there because Isaiah Collier shot 20% from the 3-point line in the preseason, and I think both of his makes hit the backboard first. Okay, that doesn't count.
Yep.
In all honesty, like they went in, but those aren't good shots. Teams will let you hit that every single time. Yeah, right. If you didn't call it, but yeah, teams will let him shoot that every time. So, and we'll see when he's even healthy. I have no idea when he's going to come back from that hamstring injury. But that's what I took away from the preseason was, yeah, they had some good moments. They had some horrible moments, and nobody had even watched them yet. Nobody's even prepared, and they had some bad moments. So it's going to be a long season. Like the rebuild's going to be bad, and it might be 2 years bad. Maybe it is. Maybe they stick around for Boozer and DeBunsta, and they just say, well, they're bad enough. They might as well be bad again, and let whoever they draft this year have free reign next year to make mistakes and learn again, and then you're in the same situation 24 months from now, which I know has a bunch of Jazz fans groaning, I'm sure, listening to the podcast.
All right, let's move from some recap talk to some preview talk.
Okay.
Like you said, the NBA season starts tomorrow. The Jazz's first game is on Wednesday, where they're going to host Memphis, and then this is all the games until we record again. Friday, they're going to host Golden State.
Okay. And because we're recording this on Monday now, it doesn't include the Mavericks game on Monday.
Yes.
But these are 2 home games.
Yes.
For the Jazz. Wednesday, as you mentioned, Memphis. Friday night against the Golden State Warriors. Memphis should be a lot better.
Yep.
The matchup I'm watching there again is Zach Edey versus Walker Kessler. Zach Edey probably starting. He kind of did both in the preseason, but I would imagine he's going to start. He did dominate Walker in the Jazz Summer League. In his first game, his very first NBA game, he was better than Walker. So I'm curious to watch that. That should be a loss. But then again, the Jazz beat Denver in their season opener, and then Denver won the title that year.
Yep.
So home openers, first games of the season are always a little wonky.
True.
And like Jamal Murray's not fully healthy.
Yeah.
So there's some, I'm still going back to Denver when the Jazz beat him. Never mind. Scratch that. But yeah, Memphis, we'll see where Memphis is.
For both of these teams, we predicted them when we did our Western Conference rundown. We predicted both of them to be playoff teams, top 8 seeds. Of course, Golden State was near the bottom of that, and I think Memphis was around top 6 for both of us. So by no means easy matchups, but like you said, you have that home court advantage. It's a home opener, so it should be loud in the Delta Center. But yeah, what do you think for the record? 1-1, 0-2?
They should be 0-2. I could see them being 1-1 just because it's early and they're playing at home. I should add that Jaren Jackson is day-to-day with a hamstring injury.
Okay.
So we may not see him. Vince Williams is out. Vince Williams was really good last year for the Grizzlies. He's out. Gigi Jackson is out. He's hurt. So they do actually have some injuries. Jamal Murray does not play for them, so don't worry about that. But they have a couple of guys who are beat up, and then they're just trying to work in some new things. Like Zach Edey changes the way you have to play. He's just such a different center than when they were playing. I know Steven Adams was kind of somewhat similar, but Steven Adams is like a great passer who never scores. Zach Edey wants to score, and I think he's going to play well. So
also, he's like 6 inches taller.
He's like 6 inches taller. Yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, I think that's probably a loss. I wouldn't be surprised if Golden State's just still figuring it out.
No, definitely.
They've got a bunch of new players, a bunch of turnovers. So 1-1 I think is fair. And then if we really wanted to progress out and look at 5 games, I think the Jazz are probably 2-3. They've got the Spurs, they've got Sacramento at home. They've got some games like that are probably winnable. So yeah, they'll 500 for the first 7 games or so, and then it should taper off.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to do our award predictions before going into the break?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, awesome. So we did this last year, and then I'm pretty sure around mid-season and also at the end of the year, we go back and see how accurate we were. But let's just start with, and of course, this is only for the Jazz.
For the
players.
Jazz,
Yes.
yeah. We're not expecting every Jazz player to win every major award in a season that they only win 25 games.
So first up, this is the easiest one, MVP. That's Larry Markkinen.
Larry Markkinen, no question about it.
Yes.
Yeah, he's the Jazz's best player. He's going to be the best player, and they can't trade him. So he will be on the team at the end of the year,
Yes.
so he's a really safe bet.
Next up, DPOY. I think the safe answer here is Walker Kessler.
He's the safe answer, and he is the best defensive player.
Yes.
Unlike Lowry, I'm not convinced he's here by the end of the year.
Okay. For this, I said Taylor Hendricks.
Okay. I'm going to go a different direction. I'm going to go with Cody Williams.
Okay, I like
Which obviously would influence what my next pick would be as well, but I think Cody can really play.
Yeah.
I think he can really play defense. And here's the thing. An average defensive center is more valuable than Cody Williams being a good defender.
Yeah.
So let's understand that Zubats existing on the planet is more important for the Clippers defense than Cody Williams playing defense for the Jazz.
Yeah.
But for this aspect and for the fun part of it, I'm going to go with, I think, Cody Williams, being the most engaged defender is going to make a bigger difference for the Jazz, even though technically just having a guy who blocks shots helps you more.
Yes.
That helps you more. So
For my pick, Taylor Hendricks, I really value defensive versatility.
Yeah.
That's something that I really value, and I think that a lot of times that's also what the actual Defensive Player of the Year award for the NBA does. Think about it, Draymond Green and Giannis are good examples of that.
Right.
But with that being said, Walker Kessler and his biggest comparison with the Jazz, Rudy Gobert has the most Defensive Player of the Year awards of all time. So,
yeah.
of course, that is very valuable as well. But me specifically, I value that versatility, and I think Hendricks can really guard 2 through 5, 1 through 5.
I think you're going to see a lot of Cody getting 1 through 4.
Okay.
I think by midseason he might be guarding the opposing team's best player. If Taylor's doing it, that's great because he's probably earned it. But Taylor did it the second half of the year last year because the Jazz wanted to see if he could guard KD one night and then Jimmy Butler the next night and then Kyrie the next night.
Yes.
I think you're going to see some similar things with Cody Williams. So Taylor and Cody, I think, are the fun bets there. Walker's the right answer, but the fun part, we'll switch it up, and I like your pick with Taylor Hendricks as well.
Rookie of the Year. I have Cody Williams here.
Yeah, Cody Williams is pretty clearly. He's going to play the most. I wouldn't be surprised if he's starting by midseason. Okay, I'll ask you this, though. Let's do this. What's Rookie of the Year voting going to look like? For the Jazz.
For the Jazz, yeah.
So Cody's 1.
Yes, and I would say it's probably Collier number 2.
Okay, and I'll go Kyle Filipowski too.
Okay, and I would say it's probably 75. If we're doing the splits of voting, I would say 75% Cody. But Collier is probably going to have a bigger role than a lot of people thought going into the season.
Ideally, he will. We'll see with this hamstring injury if it sets him back. And then if the Jazz have any injuries in the front court, maybe it just goes to Drew Eubanks, but I could see them going to Kyle Filipowski. Yeah. And the nice thing about Flip is he can play the 4.
True.
So he can play both front court positions. You really can't ask Drew Eubanks to play the 4. He's exclusively a 5. So that might actually allow Flip to get on the floor at some point, maybe a little bit earlier than people thought. Again, I might be the only person banging the Kyle Filipowski drum, but I think he can play a little bit, and I'm really worried about Isaiah Collier's inability to hold onto the ball and shoot, which he's a guard. Your job is to get people involved and make shots, and he can get people involved. He just doesn't do it consistently enough because of the turnovers.
Next up, 6th man of the year. I have Jordan Clarkson for this, but I've put in my notes dark horse Bryce Sensabaugh.
I'm going to go with John Collins.
Okay.
I think this is going to be a good role for John.
Yeah.
John really played well last year to close the season, his second half of the year, and he was starting. And Lowry was out, Jordan Clarkson was out, so we had a lot more shots. I think John could be pretty well could play well in the spot if he is fully engaged in doing it. But he's got $25 million coming to him. He's got a player option next year. Maybe he'd be a little more engaged. I guess if it was a contract, if it was a team option, maybe he'd really be playing a different way. But I kind of like the way he's played off the bench so far. He's kind of being rough. He's kind of being a little bit more of a bruiser. And he can use his fouls more easily now if he wants to. So I'm going to go John Collins for 6th man of the year. But I like Bryce too. I think Bryce is really fun to watch this year. I think he's actually had a good preseason.
Next up, most improved player. I think the easy answer here would be Keontae or Taylor Hendricks.
Yeah.
But I think that sort of is going away, and this is a big conversation in NBA discourse right now.
Are you writing these down, by the way?
I'm not, but
we can go it after you. Okay.
This is a big conversation among NBA fans right now, is that second-year players should be unable to win the most improved player because you're supposed to improve from your rookie season in the league, right? So because of that, I put Walker Kessler. I expect him to have a sort of a bounce back year from his second year that wasn't as impressive.
And I'm going to go with Johnny Juzang.
Okay.
Who's had a really good preseason.
I like that a lot.
I think Johnny's playing really well. Johnny Juzang, by the way, in the preseason, 52% on almost 5 threes a game. In four games, he's only playing, let's see, he's playing 17 minutes. He's getting 5 threes up in 17 minutes. So he's not even thinking. He's just shooting the ball as soon as he touches it, which I like to see. Yeah, if you don't want to include second-year players, the answer is probably Keontae.
Yeah.
Like, I think Keontae's going to be good this year. And I'm feeling a little bit better, actually, of mid-season last year being like, I think there's a world where Keontae averages 20 points per game in his second season in the NBA. I think there's a world where Keontae George averages 20 points per game this year.
Yeah.
He was at 14 in the preseason, but he only played 21 minutes a night and did shoot the heck out of the ball. I don't think he's going to continue to hit 45% of his threes, but I think he's going to keep getting better throughout the season. But yeah, I'll go with Johnny Juzang as far as being a guy who had a real chance of being out of the NBA already, too. I think by the end of the year, the Jazz might be playing him.
Yeah.
So,
regarding my Walker pick, he sort of had an on and off preseason. Like there were good games and bad games.
Yep.
A good one to point out is the Kings game. He had 10 points, 9 rebounds, 4 blocks, didn't miss a shot. But the biggest thing for him is he only took 4 shots.
Yeah.
Right? Like he needs to get more of those, just whether it be putbacks or lobs or whatever it is, just get more shots up. And I think that he really could be a double-double guy for the first time in his career.
Yeah, he needs to be.
Yes.
Starting center with his skills, he should be 12, 12, and 3.
Yeah.
Like that's what should be very expected of Walker Kessler. Good sign for Walker, 76% shooting from the floor in the preseason. Remember, he should have led the NBA in field goal percentage his rookie year. He was 3 shots short of getting it because he got a concussion late in the season and it ended his year. Otherwise, he would have been a rookie who set the field goal percentage record or won it that year. He would have been the field goal percentage champ for that season. Last year, I'll pull it up, like his numbers dropped significantly when it came to his efficiency. He went from 72 to 65, which is weird. 65 for a center who doesn't shoot jump shots at all, only dunks, is really bad. And then my concern about Walker this year, and again, it's small, but that's a problem that it's small. He only attempted 2 free throws in 22 minutes per game, so 2 per game in 22 minutes per game, and shot 33%.
Yeah,
like
that's rough.
You got to be up at 70% now. Like this is your 3rd year in the league. That's been your issue. It was your issue coming out of Auburn. Where's the shooting? Where's the touch? And I don't mean threes. I mean free throws. Because if teams can just foul you and you're going to miss your free throws, they'll just foul you.
Yes.
So you got to work on that. Otherwise, you probably can't finish games, even though the Jazz might not be in enough close games for it to matter.
Last award, a new one among the NBA cabinet. Clutch Player of the Year for the Jazz. Who do you think? Key. I put Keontae as well. I figured that Laurie would be the safe answer, but I like Keontae for that.
Keontae was really good in fourth quarters last year. His percentages went way up. And Will Hart has said to me several times as the season has been going underway in the preseason, he said, Keontae's a feel player. He's been saying that a lot about him. And feel means like because he gets in the rhythm of the game where he like gets engaged a certain way. Keontae's really engaged in the fourth quarter, and that's when he's played his best. And so his biggest shots have come like against Golden State last year in that fun win right before the All-Star break. Keontae gets his field going, and that's fourth quarter. That's clutch play, and I think Jazz need a guy who can get shots off and create their own, and he can.
All right, that's our award predictions. We'll come back to those, like I said, around mid-season and also at the end of the season. You want to take a break?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get to our Jazz mailbag. Stick around, more Jazz Nails coming up next. Welcome back to the Jazz Notes podcast. Ben Anderson, Chandler Holt. All right, we like to do this at the end of every podcast. We get to the mailbag. It's been successful. We appreciate everyone who follows along and sends in questions. And you can either DM them or respond to the prompt that I put out every Monday. All right, let's start with some of the DMs, Chandler.
Yes. First question here from Aggie fan Dan. What can advanced analytics do to help the Utah Jazz get an edge as they assemble a contending team over the next decade?
Well, keep shooting more threes. And really the idea for the Jazz is, they've got all these guys in who conceptually become good shooters. I know Collier's not that, but Keontae projects as a pretty good shooter.
Yep.
Lowry's a great shooter. Cody Williams, I think, looks pretty good. He didn't take a lot of Colorado, but actually hit some hit at an okay percentage in the preseason. In fact, what did he shoot in the preseason? I can pull that up really quickly. He was 26%, so no, he was bad. Yes. But he also, I think he missed his first 5 and got better after that. Yeah. I think he missed his first 5 over his first 2 games. And then Taylor Hendricks also shot poorly. Taylor Hendricks was at 26%. I think Taylor's going to shoot fine. He was 37% last year. I think Cody Williams is going to be fine. Lowry's going to be fine. if Keontae George is shooting close to 40%, the Jazz could be a good shooting team, and the idea is have all those guys out there, and then can Kyle Filipowski shoot if he ends up being a part of the rotation as well? Again, kind of ironically, because that's been his issue, I guess, in practice. Kyle Filipowski's 27% is better than both Cody Williams and Taylor Hendricks. So that's a good sign.
And another thing, I think a big part of advanced analytics is looking at specific lineups and who play well together and who don't. For example, last year, Walker and John Collins couldn't share the floor together.
Couldn't play, yeah.
And I think that using that, if you're talking about over the next decade, I think that looking at those numbers year in and year out will be a good way to tell who you should and shouldn't keep on the roster.
By the way, interesting number. Bryce Sensabaugh, 41% from three in the preseason on almost 4 a game. In 21 minutes. So we talked about how well Juzang shot. I mean, Juzang shot too well, to the point where you're like, well, you got to throw it out. Nobody shoots 52%, but his shot goes in every time he shoots it. Bryce takes a lot of threes kind of within the offense. Juzang's playing at the end of games, and he's just kind of wide open. Yeah. And the second unit is out there, the third unit. So I think Juzang's a better shooter than Bryce, don't get me wrong, but Bryce's number at 41 is really encouraging. And even Danny Ainge said at the end of last year, I think Bryce Sensabaugh is a better shooter than his numbers would imply. Will Hardy said the same thing in the preseason to us. He's just I think he can shoot. And he's shown that. That's big for Bryce. If Bryce doesn't make shots, he's not an NBA player.
True.
If he makes shots, it opens up everything else he does, and then he gets pretty interesting. Yes. So, yeah. And it's not just three-point shots. Actually, the way I want to answer this question, because I think it's interesting, is how are you ahead of the game of what's next? So analytics so often is a reaction to what the winning team just did. Yep. And they say, well, what did we see in the numbers that implied that they had success? And then we copied that. And, we go back to the Spurs being the first team to shoot corner threes and realizing that had spacing, and so everyone started doing that. And then you look at the Celtics last year, shot the most threes of any team ever, right? And they're going to even do more this year. And they won the championship. So everyone wants to add that. Sometimes it's just find what's the next thing. Yes. And can you lean into the next thing? Can you get there? Now, so often having the next thing means you have the best player who's able to get to the next base, who has evolved, and then you match your offense to match that player who's evolved past everybody. And the Jazz just may not have that guy.
Yeah, and something that's interesting about the Celtics, finding that next thing, it wasn't even just one player. It was all five of them.
Yeah, right.
Everyone can shoot.
Everyone can shoot.
So, yeah, I agree with you. I think that's just finding the next thing. Next question from Jimmy Robinson.
Before we move on,
yes.
How quickly does that work a guy like Walker Kessler out of the NBA? That's a big question.
Yes.
Because a while, not long ago, it was 6 years ago, you could have 3 shooters and 2 non-shooters on the floor, and you're okay with 2 non-shooters.
Yeah.
And then 2 years ago, it was you can't have, or you can have 1 non-shooter on the floor. You can have Russell Westbrook if you have everybody else.
Yep.
Or you can have Rudy Gobert if you have everyone else. Now, Derek Lively shooting threes in Dallas. Yeah. He's their center. He couldn't shoot at all in college, but now that's the next step. All these guys, Donovan Clingan stepped out and hit threes. Zach Edey's practicing threes. You just might not be able to play if you don't shoot threes.
That's true.
So the league may evolve into John Collins and Kyle Filipowski and further away from Walker, despite what Walker does so well.
Yes. Honestly, I could see it sort of being right now, Walker, with his skill set and how the NBA is right now, he could be a starting center. I think that eventually, I see what you're saying, in a couple of years, maybe he's the most that he can do if he doesn't add a 3-point shot is come off the bench.
Yeah, for 13 minutes a night.
Yeah, exactly, and be used for specific roles. If you are getting killed on the boards, and then still you have to put 4 shooters next to him and hope that it doesn't come back to bite you.
We used to think of bigs who shot as they're specialists. Mm-hmm. That's his one thing that he does. He steps in and shoots threes like a Steve Novak, even though he wasn't a traditional big. He's kind of a 3-4. But now it's going to be the opposite. Oh, well, that's just your rim protector that you're going to put in for 10 minutes to make it hard to score layups. Yes. And then you're going to bring him out and play your other guy 25 minutes a night. I think that is where I don't think that is where the game's going.
Yes.
We just don't have the talented 7-footers yet to all match that. But Wemby's going to demand it. Chet's going to demand it. The only way to beat those teams is to pull those guys out of the paint.
Yep. Because
they're going to block too many shots otherwise. So everyone's going to shoot threes. So that's what analytics is going to do to help or hurt the Jazz.
Next up from Jimmy Robinson, 6 months from now, as the season is ending, if you ask the same question, is Cody Williams in at the 4?
Yeah, so here was the question. I asked this on the radio today. Excuse me, I didn't copy and paste this very well.
Okay.
I asked Tim Lacombe, who are the Jazz's 4 best players?
Yes.
Gut, don't think about it. So let's answer that really quick.
Okay.
Who are the Jazz's 4 best players?
Larry Markkinen.
Lowry 1.
Colin Sexton.
2.
3 and 4 is where it gets.
Yeah, it gets really tricky.
It's really sticky.
It falls off a cliff.
Yeah, I would say Keontae.
That's what he said.
And then honestly, after, like, if you asked me a year ago, I would say I think Walker Kessler can be that. But
We said that.
Yeah.
Our debate last year was, is Jordan Clarkson or Walker Kessler the Jazz's second best player?
Yeah. Honestly, are we projecting or just right now?
Right now, today.
Okay.
And then where do we think it's going to be in 6 months?
I would say John Collinson.
Okay. And I might go Jordan Clarkson, which is funny. We both endorse who we think our sixth man of the year is. That's probably the order I would go in. Like, I still think Jordan's pretty useful.
Yes.
It would be great if it's Walker.
Yeah.
It's a huge deal if Keontae really is the Jazz's third best player, unless it's just like everyone else is so bad that he's there. But I actually think he's good, and so I think that's a jump. I think it's helpful that he's that good, and he could potentially even be better than Colin at some point this year. But I do think those are the first two obvious guys, and then 6 months from now, what are we thinking? I still would probably say I think there's a real chance Walker is the player who gets traded this year for the Jazz.
Yeah.
Because of what we're talking about, because I think you might get some intrigue from Kyle Filipowski, because you can always draft Walker. Like, there's always a 7-foot shot blocker.
Yes.
Like, Yves Misty was the 23rd overall pick this year. Like, that guy's just around. Donovan Clingan, now he went 8. You don't want to use an 8th pick to replace Walker Kessler if you just had Walker Kessler. But if Clingan's so much better than Walker, because in today's NBA, you either have to be freakishly athletic at center, like Derek Lively, or huge, like Zach Edey, or Derek Lively's the best of both worlds because he is both, or Wemby is huge and super athletic. Like, that's the perfect player.
Yes.
Chet's in that conversation as well. Like, is Walker big enough, or is he athletic enough, or can he really shoot? And he can't. Like, that's the problem. He's not elite physically anymore in the NBA. He's tall. He's up to 270 pounds, but, like, he's not elite at that. Doesn't have elite size. He's not one of the 5 best athletic centers in the NBA, and he doesn't shoot at all. So it's like all the things I like about Walker, and there are a lot of them, aren't where the league is going at all. So if Walker's fourth, something has really changed for him. Like, he's a great shot blocker. He's not fouling out of games. He's getting a ton of rebounds. It's just like his production is impossible to argue with. I struggle to see where he fits in the modern NBA because he's not even like a really good combination of those 3 things where it's like, no, he doesn't have elite size, but he's a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
And, he's not an elite athlete, but he's a 7 out of 10. Maybe you could argue that. But if you're going to be all those things, think Brook Lopez, you better be Splash Mountain elite shooter, and he's not.
No.
So that's my fear for Walker. And maybe I'm just a little jaded because he got worked by Donovan Clingan on Friday night, and that's my latest memory of him. But, like, I do think that's going to be a struggle for him most nights. And I'm really curious to see how he does over these first couple of weeks as a starter again, because it's going to be a weird question for the Jazz of what do you do with him going forward.
Yes, definitely. All right, let's move into the...
But 6 months from now, I think it's probably the same guys. Do I think Cody will be there? No, I do not think Cody Williams will be one of the Jazz's 4th best player at any point this year.
Yeah.
He's 19. He's got a long ways to go.
First question here from Corey. Over under 1.5 Jazz players get into the Rising Stars game. What say you? Under, really?
Yeah, I don't think statistically people are going to reward Collier.
Okay.
And I don't think Flip's going to play enough.
But sophomores get in as well.
Oh, that's right. Rookie sophomores get in as well.
So I would say easy over.
Oh, easy over. Yeah. If it's yes, Cody and Keontae should both be in. Sorry. Yes, that's a much better. If you're asking rookie sophomore game, that's right. It will be over too.
Next up from Josh Roberts, how likely is it that we see one or more of John Collins, Jordan Clarkson, and or Colin Sexton moved by the deadline this season? I have a question for you. We've had a few of these questions, like who do you think will be traded, how many, et cetera, et cetera. Why do you think people put Colin Sexton in there so much over, say, Walker Kessler or somebody else?
Because Colin's got a great combination of production and cost. He's only $18 million a year, so it makes a lot of sense. And the problem is the Jazz don't really actually have a lot of depth at guard. I know people think they do. It's like they don't. Yeah, you've got experience there in Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson, but like Jazz didn't want to play Patty Mills.
No.
Like Patty Mills didn't want to play here either. I'm sure he has fun playing, but like I don't think he came in to be like, great, I'm the backup point guard for the Utah Jazz. Like, that's not what he wanted. Sorry for the accent. But like that was not what the plan was. It was like, I'm going to teach these young guys how to be adults and earn $3 million to be the highest paid assistant coach in the NBA.
Yes.
Essentially. And now he's having to play because they had one injury. It's like, well, Keontae's going to miss 14 games.
Yeah.
And Jordan's going to miss 14 games. And Colin's never going to miss a second. It was so funny on Friday's game of preseason. All the starters stayed in the locker room. They didn't even come out they were lifting weights or whatever they were doing in the locker room.
Yeah.
Colin played the entire second half. He's an insane person. He's like, yeah, starters are playing, right. But you're a starter, Colin. Leave. Nah, I'm playing the whole game. What are you talking about? He's crazy in the best way. So that's why I think the Jazz like Colin.
Yeah, no,
I think he really has value going forward too, as like the sixth man. Again, I think there's an argument he could still be the starter if Keontae doesn't really develop this year. He could be the guy that they lean on more heavily. I wouldn't give up on Colin quite yet.
No, yeah.
If you wanted to move on from a veteran and John Collins or Jordan Clarkson, you say, I think you guys can help somebody else more than you're helping us, and that's probably good for your careers. I think that's reasonable. But I don't know if any of them get traded. It's just hard to make trades in today's NBA.
That's
really hard. Way more likely one of Walker, Drew Eubanks, and Svi Mikhailiuk get traded.
Okay. I would say that I was going to go the opposite way of you. Talking about John Collins, it's sort of in the air how well he fits with the Jazz roster.
Uh-huh.
And like you said, it's hard to make trades. But if you can, you would, right? I would say for John Collins, he's that type of fit with the Jazz. Jordan Clarkson, I think he can always stay around, and Utah loves him. If the Jazz can make a trade, I would say they would try to trade Collins, Clarkson for value, or Walker Kessler also probably for value.
Yeah. Like if midseason somebody's offering you like not a horrible first-round draft pick for Walker, I could see the Jazz saying yes.
Yeah.
It's where they got to with Ochai last year. Problem is John Collins makes $25 million a year.
True.
It's hard for teams to take that on unless they're like, hey, we got a guy who's hurt, who's expiring, or just is expiring. Do you want to take him? We don't want him anymore. You take him and do whatever you want with him for the last 3 months of the season. And we need the third big on our roster who can play a little bit during the regular season, and you're not betting on him to come in and win you playoff games. Like, that's not who John Collins is. Yes. John Collins is fine, but he's a minutes eater right now in the regular season, and actually played well in Atlanta in the playoffs before he got his max deal, but he hasn't been that since. So that's the hard part.
No,
and
I agree.
If there's a team that's just absolutely dreadful offensively with their second unit, which ironically is how the Jazz got Clarkson in the first place, Quinn Snyder was like, I can't play Dante Exum ever again. I never want to play this person again. I need points to come off the bench just to make life easier. That's where Jordan Clarkson steps in. He's like an instant offense, full offensive player. So does a team like Orlando not be able to score at all. And they're like, hey, man, we're good. Like, we are the third best team in the Eastern Conference good, but we just cannot score at all. And Jonathan Isaac's hurt every single day.
Yeah.
He's out for his career. Whatever. Here's the $13 million for $13 million trade. Maybe you do that.
Yeah.
Something like that.
No, definitely. And I would say the problem with John Collins is that if you're giving him to a rebuilding or a team that's not contending for the playoffs, they would want something else to take on John Collins. And then there's no winning team that wants John Collins. So I see what you're saying there.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part.
Yeah. Okay, next up from Jake the Lynx. After listening to the last couple media interviews with John Collins, it sounds like he might have a real problem with coming off the bench. How much of an issue is that? Will Hardy try to find a way to play Walker and John together again? Is John more likely to get traded now?
I do not expect them to try to play together at all.
Yes.
Who cares if he's coming off the bench? Like, is ultimately the answer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's a mean business. This is a super competitive business. This is the NBA. This isn't third grade where everyone gets to play a full quarter of junior Jazz basketball. Like, Walker, it's starter. So, John, you're coming off the bench. Here's $25 million. Hope you like it. If you don't like it, fine. You're a $13 million bench player or a $25 million 20-minute-a-night bench player. Who cares?
Yeah.
Fine. So that's ultimately what the Jazz are going to say. And what's John going to say? Shucks. Like, what's he going to do? He's a backup center.
Yeah.
I wish there was more nuance to this conversation. And John's a nice enough guy. I don't think he was going to ruin the locker room.
No.
But also it's about, what are you ruining? 25 win teams locker room?
Like, yeah, John, give us a better lottery odds.
Yeah, right. Like, there's fun locker rooms that win 25 games. There's toxic locker rooms that win 25 games. Ultimately, you win 25 games, and these guys aren't on the roster in 3 years. Like, that's what ultimately I think the Jazz have decided with John Collins.
A lot of Collins questions in the mailbag today. Next up from Todd Crow. If Collins isn't boozer on D and actually plays hard, should we keep him long term? Coupled with, can Flip do what he did in Portland in garbage time to starters/rotation players in the next few years, or is that reserved for Jokic?
Well, I mean, I think starting with Filipowski, I think the things he does are real. Like, he does things that are unique for a 7-footer. He's a really good ball handler, and he's a really good passer. Those aren't going to get worse now in the NBA. He can do those against elite level players. Yes. He's not a great rebounder. He wasn't a great rebounder at Duke. He was just a good rebounder. And then he has the ability with his athleticism, his coordination, get the ball off the floor and make a read. And then his best thing, again, it's boring to say, but his best thing would be become a 38% three-point shooter, which is how Kelly Olynyk is still in the NBA. He's the worst defensive player in the league. But he hits threes at a really high level, and then he does enough passing and other little things and is smart, knows where to be on the court to help your team win. Filipowski will get there.
Yes.
He's not there today, but he will get there. John Collins, what was the first part of the question?
If Collins isn't Boozer on D and actually plays hard, should we keep him long term?
No.
I agree.
Yeah, and the thing about Boozer, he was an awesome rebounder. He averaged like 13 rebounds a game in a league that was a different type of league. Like there were way fewer possessions.
Yep.
Now there were fewer threes that probably meant easier rebounds, but like Boozer was an awesome rebounder. I mean, Boozer was a 2-time All-Star and a gold medalist. There's a reason all those things. So I'll flip the question. If John Collins becomes Carlos Boozer, you should keep him around.
Yeah.
You should absolutely keep him. He's not though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next question. Here's a chance to give some love to Keontae. Ski and Sport Utah. Which young player takes the biggest leap this year? Not most improved, so we're not excluding second-year players. I think Keontae can, like you said, maybe be a 20-point per game scorer this year.
Yeah, he should be. He won't win most improved player. They shouldn't give it to second-year players.
Yes.
He will be in the conversation. I don't think he may get like 2 votes, something like that. But I think Keontae should be better. He was good last year. His shooting numbers were so abysmal. 39% from the floor, 33% from three. Again, if those are each up 3 percentage points, he's at 42 and 36, and he's a pretty good player. They were so bad the second half of the year that I think it really hurt him. But I think those numbers are going to be up. I think that, they need to be up. Otherwise, he's Taylor Horton Tucker.
Yeah.
But shout out to Taylor for making the Bulls roster. Good for him. But yeah, he's just got to shoot better, and I think he will.
Yeah.
But he has to. He didn't actually shoot that well at Baylor either. Like his numbers weren't very good. I know he's playing out of position. We'll see. If it doesn't come together, he's a borderline NBA player. Like Taylor Horton Tucker's a borderline NBA player. He's fun to watch, but he's got to shoot better. And the good news is he really has in preseason. And it's not just that like the shots are going in. He's taking better shots.
Yes.
And then I had this stat. This was before the Portland game, so I haven't updated it, but I think he was. Let me pull it up. I can give you off the top of my head. I have to pull it up really quickly. I didn't see what his box score number was. But going into the Portland game, he was 7 of 12 on 2-point field goals. Or no, 8 of 12, 75%. Keontae George was 75% on 2-point field goals in the preseason.
That's
now,
impressive.
A little weird that in 4 games he'd only taken 12.
Yeah,
that's only 3 a game. A lot of his shots had been threes, but he could not finish to save his life last year. He was awful when he got inside the paint. So that was the problem, is when he wasn't shooting threes, he really couldn't do a whole lot else to get the game going. But he was 8 of his first 12. I've got this game pulled up right now. And then in this game, he was 0 of 2. So he ended up 8 of 14. Still really good.
Yeah.
And it's well over 50%. So if he's finishing better, and he is doing it with like touch, he's using better pacing, kind of stop and start stuff, hezzy stuff that allows him to get all the way to the rim, or he's using like good little floaters off the glass that seem to really be going at a high rate, that will help all of his scoring beyond just being suddenly a 45% three-point shooter. And actually being good inside the arc will open up his ability to shoot threes, because you have to give him a little bit of room and he'll pull up on you.
Yes.
And he's a better pull-up three-point shooter than he is, or I should say he's a better off-the-dribble three-point shooter than he is spot-up shooter. So, like, if you're giving him space with the ball in his hands, going back to Will Hardy calling him a field player, he's actually pretty deadly. So, anyway.
Also, I want to give a little bit of love to Taylor Hendricks here. I think he could take a big jump. I think most of that will come defensively, just making better decisions, being where you're supposed to be more often. But still, I think that with you picking Cody Williams as a dark horse DPOY, it's got me excited to think about how deadly a wing combination of defenders those two could be.
Conceptually, all the stuff the Jazz are doing makes sense.
Yes.
Really, it does. Like, 2 huge wing defenders in Cody Williams and Taylor Hendricks, who can switch and swap and flip all around and guard 1 through 4, or maybe even 2. Cody can guard 1 through 4, and Taylor can guard 2 through 5, or maybe even 1 through 5 at some point.
Yeah.
That's really impressive. And then Keontae can do whatever. Lowry at 7 feet tall, if he's your 3rd or 4th best defender, is probably an okay thing.
Sure.
Like, at his height, with his athleticism, he should be an okay defensive player. When everyone's bad around him, he's going to get burnt. But if there's other good players around him, he should be fine. If Walker could be a rim-protecting center and that still exists in the NBA in 3 years, great.
Yep.
It all makes sense. And Kyle Filipowski can shoot and add that different dynamic, and Colin Sexton can come off the bench and score 1,000 points. All of these things make sense. It's just like, how many of them are real? And that's what the Jazz are trying to figure out this year. The Jazz are trying to figure out How many of those 7 things I just said are real and should be on the team in 2 years, and how many of them need to be replaced in the draft or in free agency?
Yes.
So,
last question here from Jazz Time Jones. How many minutes are the JCs going to play per game? If it's under 20, will they be happy? If it's over 20, do they win too many games?
they'll both be over 25.
Yeah.
They just have to. I've done a whole big numbers breakdown. Like, you have to play 240 minutes a night. Lowry can't play 40.
Yes.
Jazz aren't coached by Tom Thibodeau, who plays his guys 40 minutes a night. Like, Lowry's going to play 34. Jordan played 30 last year, so he's not going to lose 5 minutes off his point per game average. And you're playing even more young guys now than you were last year. So there's a chance that, like, Jordan's numbers, I don't think they'll go up from 30. They should be down from there. But what did John play last year? I guess since he's not starting, he shouldn't be getting as many as he was. But let's see, John Collins last season played 28 minutes a night. He'll play that.
Again, yeah, I think that's pretty fair. Maybe a minute or two less. But also, if it's over 20, do they win too many games? No.
Nope.
This is something we talked about last year. I feel like there's been a lot of dogging on Don Collins this episode. But Don Collins, like, he puts up good stats, but a lot of times he doesn't have the impact that you need to win games from that position.
Yeah, John's just fine.
Yeah.
John's like a fine player. He's 15-8. He's fine.
Yeah.
37% from the three-point line. Like, it's not going to win you 10 extra games this year.
Yeah.
And again, I think the Jazz, I've laid a lot of this out. I get it. I do this for a living. Jazz fans pick it up and put it down. May have some excitement, may not. Like, the first half of the Jazz schedule is insane. It's brutal. And it's always going to look brutal when every team is expected to be better than you are.
Yeah.
But the second half of the year, ideally, if the Jazz make more trades and do similar to what they did the last 2 seasons, if they're losing games in the second half of the season, they're playing all the Detroits. They're playing all the bad teams in the league. The second half of the year, if they're worse, I mean, that's where the Jazz dropped 12 wins off their win total last year, and they weren't good last year, but like, it's that you're not 500 at the trade deadline. You're 10 games below 500 at the trade deadline, and then you're equally bad in the second half of the year.
Yeah, if not worse.
And that's very realistic for what that happens for the Jazz this season. And their problem was last year they were 26-26 after beating Oklahoma City before they traded Kelly Olynyk and Simone Fontecchio and Ochai Agbaji. And the year before that, they were 35-36 through 71 games. Will Hardy, what are you doing? Yeah. You had that team? That team had won 35 games and 71 tries, and you had already traded Mike Conley and Jared Vanderbilt and Malik Beasley at that point. So I think they're going to be so far below that when they get to the trade deadline, like legitimately 10 games, maybe 15 games below by the time they get to mid-February, that it's going to be impossible to make those up. So no, I don't think playing John Collins or Jordan Clarkson 25 minutes is going to hurt you.
All right, that's a wrap for this episode. When we come back next week, we're going to have regular season to talk about. That's crazy.
Very excited to do it. Fun to get through the preseason. I like the offseason. I like talking about the draft, but the games are why we're here. And yeah, coming up Wednesday night, Jazz versus the Memphis Grizzlies. Stick around for our coverage at KSLSports.com. Find us on Twitter, Ben's Hoops, and see Holt Sports. We'll talk to you next week.